We always hear about the 21st century being the Asian century. And sure, that's part of it, but it's only half the story. Because more and more, this is shaping up to be an African century. And if we really want to understand what that means, we need to zoom in on one of its most fascinating players. So let's get into it.
All right, let's start with the big picture, because you have to appreciate the scale of what's happening here. We are talking about a continent going through a demographic explosion unlike anything we've ever seen.
So right now, Africa is home to more than 1.4 billion people. But by 2050, that's not that far away. That number is expected to hit almost 2.5 billion. Think about that for a second. That's like adding the entire current populations of China and the United States to one continent in just a couple of decades. I mean, the scale is just mind-blowing.
Now, here's what's really wild when you look at this chart. While Europe's population is flatlining, even shrinking, and Asia's incredible growth is finally starting to slow down, Africa is still the world's last great frontier of demographic expansion. It is young, it's urbanizing fast, and it is absolutely on the rise. And, of course, in the middle of all this action, certain countries are emerging as real power players. So we're going to zoom in on East Africa, where one nation is strategically positioning itself to be a critical hub for the whole region, a command node, if you will. And that nation is Kenya.
So, how did Kenya get here? The story we usually hear about colonial independence is that it was a clean break. Flags come down, empires go home, the end. But the reality? Oh, it was way more complicated than that. It wasn't just a simple breakup.
And this is where things get really interesting, right? It's the central puzzle we're trying to solve today. As you watch Kenya's influence grow, you get this strange sense of déjà vu. It just feels familiar, like we've seen this kind of power structure somewhere before. So what's going on?
Well, the key to unlocking this whole thing is an idea we're calling the Chimera clone. This is our core concept for today. Just picture a hybrid organism. It's got the DNA of its imperial parent, in this case, Great Britain, but it's also been changed, mutated, by its own unique environment, its different size, and the fact that it's operating in a totally new era. Look, independence wasn't just won on the battlefield, not by a long shot. After World War II, Britain was basically broke, and you had the new United Nations pushing back against colonialism, not to mention armed resistance movements like the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya itself. So Britain had to negotiate its way out. It was an exit under pressure.
And this slide, right here, this is the key. As Britain was leaving, it tried to hang on to its economic advantages. Trade deals, access for its companies. So a lot of these new nations didn't actually tear down the old system. Instead, they inherited a pre-built imperial framework, this kind of structural scaffold that was left behind. And Kenya was built right on top of it.
To really get why Kenya is so unique, you have to see it in context. We need to compare it to Britain's other major African inheritances. So let's take a quick look at how Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa all took that British model and ran with it in totally different directions.
Okay, so this table lays it all out for us, and it's super clear. Just look at the differences. South Africa was built as a settler homeland, right? A huge permanent European population, which led to a totally different path. Nigeria was more of an administrative setup, but that imperial stamp was kind of watered down by other big factors. Kenya, though, it's right in that sweet spot in the middle.
First up, South Africa. It was designed from the ground up to be a permanent new home for European settlers. That's what led to the horror of apartheid and a state that was socially nothing like Britain. Kenya, on the other hand, had a much smaller group of British settlers, and most of them packed up and left after independence in '63.
Now let's talk about Nigeria. Its path was different for other reasons. For one, it was surrounded by French colonies, which kind of diluted the pure British influence in the region. And internally, especially in the north, you had these really powerful Islamic legal and social systems that were there long before the British arrived, and they never got fully replaced by the imperial model. So you see where this is going, right? Kenya ends up in this really unique middle position. It didn't have that massive permanent settler class like South Africa, and it didn't have the deep religious and regional divides that weakened the British template in Nigeria. And that's why, of the three, it has the closest resemblance to Britain's original administrative DNA.
Okay, so that brings us right back to our big idea, the Chimera clone. Let's actually look at how this plays out today in the real world. Where can we actually see these echoes of the imperial parent?
This quote it says it all. Scale differs,
Structure rhymes. The infrastructure the British built for their own purposes became the foundation for Kenya's post-colonial power. Think about Nairobi. It started as just a simple railway depot, but it grew into the diplomatic and financial capital of East Africa, a path that sounds very, very familiar.
And here is a perfect example of what we're talking about. Look at this parallel. You have London, the historic financial center of an empire with institutions like the London Stock Exchange, and then you have Nairobi, which has become the modern financial hub for all of East Africa with its own Nairobi Securities Exchange. The structure absolutely rhymes. And get this isn't just about money or politics. It runs deep into the culture. In Kenya today, the English Premier League isn't just a popular sport. It is a cultural phenomenon. The loyalty people have for clubs like Manchester United or Arsenal is unbelievable. That cultural gravity, from TV rights to betting markets, it still pulls back toward that old imperial center.
All right, so we've seen the historical echo, the cultural echo, but what about right now, in the 21st century? Well, these old patterns are showing up again, but this time they're playing out in the digital world, and it's fascinating.
Okay, first off, we need to be clear about something. Kenya isn't just playing in the digital space, it is a global leader. It has one of the highest rates of mobile money use in the entire world. Services like M-Pesa are used by over 85% of the population. It's an absolute digital powerhouse.
And that leads us to this really cool metaphor for the new era. The British Empire built its power by controlling the oceans, right? Ruling the seas. Well, in the 21st century, Kenya is learning how to project its own influence across a new kind of global commons, the digital seas.
Yeah, we're not talking about ships and cannons anymore. This is a whole new ballgame. This new power is about things like information warfare, about shaping conversations and narratives online, and using vast digital networks to build influence. And Kenyan online communities are already famous for their ability to jump into global conversations and make their presence felt.
So when you put it all together, the shared administrative DNA, the parallel financial structures, that cultural gravity, and now this emerging digital power, it leads you to one final, really provocative question. Is this just Empire Reborn?
The answer is no. It's not a copy. It's something way more complex, and frankly, more interesting than that. It's Empire Refracted. Kenya isn't a new Britain, not in power or in scale. But its path, its structure, it mirrors its imperial parent. Only it's been bent or refracted through a new geography, a new time, and a completely new kind of evolution. A true Chimera clone.